my driveway was packed with tables covered in stuff that I thought that I might sell. Neighbors came and went, poking around, asking prices. Some haggled, some just handed over crumpled bills, but for the most part, they smiled politely and made a little small talk and then moved on. And by mid-morning, strangers were starting to notice the sale as they were walking or driving by. And then the more people gathered, the more people noticed the sale, so by maybe 11 to 11:30, I was getting quite a lot of foot traffic and making quite a few sales. And at one point, I noticed a man lingering by a table of tools, picking up a wrench and then a hammer and turning them over in his hands like he was deciding one or another. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt, jeans, and a Dodgers cap. Nothing very unusual about him, but something about the way his eyes darted around that made me very uneasy. On the assumption that he was looking around for the person running the sale, I walked over and introduced myself. The guy then said he was interested in the tools and then asked if I had any more, but his voice was sort of flat, like he was reading from a script but very badly. I pointed to a box of odds and ends near the back of the driveway and he nodded and then walked over slowly. By noon, it was just a trickle of people wandering in and out. I was very tired and ready to pack it in, and that's when I noticed the man in the Dodgers cap again, meaning he'd been hanging around for almost an hour without buying anything. He was hanging around the edge of the driveway, pacing past the tables like he hadn't already seen everything 3 times over. But then, he wasn't looking at the stuff anymore. He seemed like he was looking at me. I tried to ignore him, announced that I was about to pack up, and then focused on the last few shoppers. A woman asked about a lamp, a teenager bought a stack of DVDs, but the whole time I kept an eye on the man in the Dodgers cap, all while trying my best to pretend that I wasn't. When the driveway was finally empty except for him, I started packing up. I told him the sale was over, that I needed to get everything back inside. He didn't leave. He just stood there, watching me, his hands shoved into his pockets. I started to get a little nervous, but told myself that he was obviously harmless, just a little odd, and that I was anxious. I loaded a couple of boxes in the garage, keeping one eye on him, but when I turned back, he had moved closer. He was standing in the middle of the driveway by that point, looking down at one of the tables, and he said something about the tools again, but his tone made it sound like he wasn't really asking. I told him that they weren't for sale anymore, that I was done for the day. He nodded, but he didn't leave. Instead, he reached down and picked up a hammer, turning it over in his hands again. And in that moment, my throat went dry. I told him to put it down, to leave, but he just stared at me, like he was thinking, making up his mind. I don't know what set him off, though. Maybe it was the way that I said it, or maybe he had been planning this all along. One second, he was standing there, and the next, he was moving towards me, and fast. I backed up, my feet stumbling over the edge of the driveway. He raised the hammer, and I turned to run. I barely made it to the garage before he grabbed me, his fingers digging into my arm. I twisted away, yanking free, but then tripped over a box. I think it was of books. It was right behind me, looming over me as I scrambled backward, searching for anything that I could grab. My hand closed around something solid and heavy, a wrench from the box that he had looked through earlier. I swung it without thinking, the metal connecting with a very sickening thud, and he stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, his face twisted in pain and rage. And I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I scrambled to my feet and ran, bolting through the side door into the house. I slammed it shut behind me, locked it, and then pressed my back against the door, listening for any sound outside. It was quiet for a moment, and then I heard the crunch of footsteps on the gravel moving away. I crept to the window, peeking out through the blinds. He was gone. The driveway was empty, the yard sale tables scattered with what was left of my things. I called the police, my voice shaking as I explained what had happened, and to my relief they arrived quicker than I thought they would. I showed them where it had happened, pointed to the hammer that he had dropped and the wrench still lying on the garage floor. They took my statement, asking questions I could barely answer, and they never found him. The man who had turned a quiet yard sale into a nightmare disappeared as quickly as he had come. And weeks passed, and I kept expecting him to show up again, to finish what he had started. And every time I heard a car pull into the driveway or a knock at the door, my heart leapt in my throat. I stopped holding yard sales, and I stopped leaving the garage door open even for a second. I watched for strangers more closely, my mind replaying the way his eyes had lingered on me, the way his hand had tightened around that hammer, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there and that one day he might return. The police told me to stay vigilant, to report anything suspicious, but there was nothing to report, just an empty driveway and the memory of his shadow stretching across the pavement. The stuff I hadn't sold that day stayed in the garage, just gathering dust, I guess, and I couldn't bring myself to touch it, to move it, or to go near the spot where it had happened. Now, it might sound pathetic, but some nights I dream about him. I see him standing at the edge of the driveway, his hands in his pockets, his eyes fixed on me. And then I wake up, and I wake up drenched in sweat. The yard sale was supposed to be a simple way to clear out the clutter, to make some extra cash, and instead, it left me with a story to send to you that I'll never forget. A scar that's invisible, but is always there. I don't know if they'll ever catch him, or if he's still out there looking for his next target. All I know is that I'll never feel safe, truly safe, in my own home again.
So, you're going to kidnap her? I asked Victor as he shared his plans with me. Not really. It would be just an act. For the first few hours, yes, she would be terrified, but when I proposed to her, she would jump right in my arms from happiness, he said while putting the ring back in his pocket. That's just wishful thinking. You know she's a slut and cheating on you, I said in a disgusted tone, which was directed to Eddie. Watch your mouth, Peter. Just because you suspect her of cheating doesn't mean she is, so stop running your mouth mindlessly. He grabbed my collar in anger and said as he slammed me to the door. Noted, I said in a slow, frustrated voice and walked away without turning back. So as you have noticed that my name is Peter and my surname is Solace, it's more like a commitment because my parents never let me forget that the surname I'm carrying is more valuable than my existence. I met Victor the day I ran away from home. He offered me help and let me stay at his place. After that, I began seeing his girlfriend Eddie, who would often make her visits to his place and stay over. One day, I saw her sneakily talking to someone over the phone. I couldn't understand her conversation, but I knew that conniving little bitch was hiding something from him. And it wasn't the only time I saw her sneaking around behind Victor's back. Or maybe he knew and chose to ignore it. But I wasn't going to keep a blind eye on things, so I chose to tell him. But that idiot did not trust me and said there must be another good explanation for her hiding whatever she's hiding. Then all of a sudden, Victor told me that today he's going to propose to that wench, and you know the rest of the story. He was planning on giving her a little scare at first before popping the question. The next morning, I woke up only to find Victor wasn't home. I figure he must still be out since he planned to propose to Eddie last night. Regardless of how it went, the guy still hasn't returned home. But that's none of my business anymore, looking at how he did not trust me when I wanted him to. I went to the bathroom to freshen up when I heard the door clicking. "Hey man, is it you?" I asked loudly, but there was no reply. So I walked out of the bathroom, only to find Victor looking like a mess. He told me that Eddie is missing and he could not find her all night. Well, it was obvious he wasn't able to since I was the one who was executing his plan of kidnapping her, just wasn't a fan of his proposal. Don't worry too much. Maybe she just moved somewhere else. Didn't I tell you she was sneaking behind your back? As I said this, he glared at me with an angry look on his face. I'm not in the mood, Peter. Shut it, he said while gritting his teeth. I shrugged and walked out, because I wasn't going to put up with his crap any more than I already have. It must seem like I'm a selfish bastard who doesn't know how to be grateful, but trust me, I am so much more than that. What do you want from me? Please let me go, Peter. As soon as I walked into the room of my private beach house, I heard Eddie scream. Not much, just for you to own up to your actions and accept the consequences, I said as I walked into the bed where she was tied up. What the hell are you talking about? She asked, making a weird expression on her face, which made me believe for a second that she was confused, but I know very well she was acting. Oh, don't play dumb with me. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been trying to seduce me from the day we met, moaning so loudly at night, knowing I was in the next room, being in a slutty dress in the morning, trying to be so nice to me. Did you think I would let you end up with Victor after all this? On top of that, I know how you were sneaking around behind his back. I grabbed her face and said, I never once tried to seduce you, and my sneaking around had nothing to do with you. It's not like I was cheating on him or something, she said, eyes full of anger and resentment toward me, which was kind of painful to watch. Oh, I know that was about your love child that your ex-lover's raising, but still, Victor doesn't know that about you. Does he now? I laughed after saying this, and now the expression she had was something that made me feel delightful. You think you are so clever. Trust me, the moment I get free from you, I will make you regret ever kidnapping me. She gritted her teeth and threatened me, which was quite amusing to watch, looking at how she was tied and helpless like a caged bird. We'll see about that. I exited the room and said that, and head toward the kitchen. And that was when I felt someone hit me on the head with something. I turned and saw Victor holding a hockey stick in his hand, which had blood on it, before I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was on a chair with handcuffs on my hands. Victor and Eddie were sitting across, staring at me, and police officers were asking questions about the whole kidnapping thing. I don't know how he found out about this, but I wasn't going to let that damned girl fool Victor anymore. You know she has a love child. Victor's expression changed as he heard. After giving me a long glare, he scoffed and said, I know about Ian. Eddie told me everything a week ago. The smirk on his face was pissing me off even more, and at that moment, officers came and told me it was time to go. You're going to regret this. I am telling you, she's a slut. She even tried to seduce me, Victor. Victor! I kept screaming as they dragged me to the car, while Victor and Eddie turned their faces away, refusing to spare me another glance. The word remorse is alien to me, and I've been like this for quite a long time. But I never felt like there was something wrong with me. There are always a few problems I struggle with, even though I am strategic and intelligent. I have a hard time finding out how to react appropriately to situations with people's confusing and emotion-driven clues. My name is Paul Matthew. I'm a well-respected attorney and a good neighbor. I've often heard from people that I have a very charming smile. Guess that must be the reason why people are attracted to me like moths to a flame. They would mostly refer to people like me as either aggressive or seductive, but I'm a married man. I have a beautiful wife and 2 sons. I love my family, but I tend to keep my distance from them as much as possible. It's not because I ever felt like something is wrong with me. Instead, I'm enticed by violence. Something is thrilling about it. But I want to keep hiding this side of me as much as possible. That is the very reason why I bury my head in work all the time. No one knows about it, but before my wife, there was this girl I was interested in. She was nice, shy, and everything. But the day we started dating, her behavior changed, and she became demanding. I started ignoring her because I knew what I would do if I met her, but she kept pestering me, challenging my patience time and time again. So one day, I finally asked her to meet me for coffee. The feeling I kept having about her, I knew people would refer to it as wrong or not okay, but I couldn't help it. As I was sitting there waiting for her, rage kept reaching my brain, and I was calm, so no one would be able to tell what was going on in my mind. As she entered, my mind suddenly filled with a purpose, and I was still feeling as calm as ever. I stared at her while blinking my eyes. The adrenaline started flowing in me, and the taste in my mouth felt metallic. She walked toward me, sat across from me, and started complaining while looking at the menu. The rage in me multiplied tenfold. The multiple images started to spring into my mind, catching me in a megalomaniac fantasy. Me reaching to her, wrapping my hands around her fragile neck, my nails digging deep into her throat, making the slight drops of blood leak through them, and her life slipping away slowly. I snapped back to reality as she waved her hands in front of my face, and I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. The place was filled with crowd, so there was no way that I'd be able to do any of the things I imagined here. An annoying couple was sitting beside the table next to mine, an old man with a girl half his age behind me, the waiter who kept roaming around taking orders and delivering them, and a group of girls sitting on the table left from us. As I was observing them with an equal focus on Ella sipping her coffee while looking at her phone, she looked up to me, making eye contact. As she noticed me being unfazed by the eye contact, she tilted the corner of her mouth and continued sipping her coffee. After finishing up the coffee, she got up annoyed and left the cafe while I was left to pay the bill. And when I was done, she was nowhere to be seen. I tried calling her, but she did not answer any of my calls. As I was annoyed and going back to my apartment, I used an escalator that was closed for some reason. A man called out to me, whom I presumed was a metro worker, and asked if I was blind for not seeing the yellow sign. I looked around and there was a yellow sign, but he continued that he was pissed on people like me for never following the rules. I kept my silence and continued staring at him, as he said I trespassed because the escalator was already closed and I had broken the law. His tone was ticking me off, and I continued staring at him, which I guess made him feel uneasy. So he changed his tone to a rather polite one and said, "Be careful next time not to trespass." He patiently kept looking at me for a mere few seconds, hoping to get a reaction or answer out of me, but then turned away by the lack of my reaction. He may have thought it was okay, but not for me. It wasn't. What I was feeling at that moment, most people might refer to as just snapped, and that was exactly the case for me. I stood there, watching calmly as he continued doing whatever he was, which I guessed alarmed him as he sneaked a peek at me. My hyper-awareness could feel him going haywire, and the cold sweat forming on his forehead, which was rather amusing to watch. After that, he started walking away from me, and I started following him with silent yet steady footsteps. The way he was walking seemed like he would start running at any given moment, but he didn't. I was hoping for him to walk to a deserted hallway where I could find him alone and do whatever I wanted with him. As I followed him, I was feeling so focused on every action that he was making, I didn't realize when a smirk formed its way to my lips. But then he walked out of the building to the crowded area, making me feel even more annoyed. I didn't give up following him. Instead, I made our distance to the point where he would not be able to notice me anymore. As he was walking forward, continuously looking left and right with unease, thinking I was still following him, he went into a supermarket. I followed him there as well, but it didn't matter. I lost sight of him. I spent a few more minutes looking for him, but when I couldn't find him, I found an exit. I walked back to my apartment building thinking about how I failed twice today into teaching those people the lesson they deserved. As I was walking inside the apartment building, my gaze went to the elevator, and a smile found its way onto my lips. As I climbed the stairs to my apartment, I thought there was no way I was going to let them go so easily, as I already knew where to find them. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so.
Zachary Latham and his neighbors, the Durham family, did not get along. They lived opposite each other on the Thornhill Road in Vineland, New Jersey, a town of about 60,000 located 40 miles south of Philadelphia. After being forced to live with his grandparents at the age of 16, the Durhams initially found Zach to be a boisterous but polite young man. But as the years went by, neither he nor the Durhams had a good word to say about one another, and ultimately, the mutual animosity came to a head because of Zach's erratic style of driving. William Durham, along with his wife Catherine, had accused their 18-year-old neighbor of reckless driving on more than one occasion, and what was intended to be a friendly word with the young man quickly soured into a confrontation. When first approached by Mr. and Mrs. Durham, instead of responding amicably to their concerns, Zach responded by pulling out his cell phone. He then spitefully accused Mrs. Durham of being a Karen and swore at an enraged Mr. Durham when he objected to his behavior. Any chance of a peaceful coexistence went straight out of the window when Zach told the couple he'd be posting the video online. And post it he did, with the video going on to be viewed more than 3 million times by TikTok users around the world. What followed was an escalating feud that was later described as a powder keg. The confrontations between Zach and the Durham family were bad enough beforehand, but the publicity Zach had garnered meant that complete strangers were pouring gasoline on an already blazing fire. Hundreds of comments on the TikTok video of the argument between Zach and the Durhams urged him to cut her tires, egg her house, or the ominously vague, go after her. Apparently, a few weeks after the recorded confrontation, Mr. and Miss Durham were minding their own business and getting on with some housework when Zach pulled up next to them in his car. Hey Karen," he is reported to have cried out. "We went viral, Karen. I made you famous." The exposure had a terrible effect on the Durhams' mental health and were even recognized around their New Jersey hometown, much to their chagrin. They sought out an injunction against the video, but were told by the police that they could not sign a complaint against Mr. Latham since the courts were closed because of the coronavirus pandemic. Then, on May 4th of 2020, Mr. and Mrs. Durham returned home from some grocery shopping to discover that Zach Latham had deliberately swerved his pickup truck at their son, who was out in the street riding his bicycle. Mr. Durham was furious. Humiliating him and his wife with online videos was one thing, but to threaten his son's safety was another thing entirely. He marched out of his house, got into his truck, and parked it right behind Zach's own vehicle, blocking him into his own driveway. And on that occasion, it was Zach's wife who was filming the exchange when he walked out of his home to confront Mr. Durham. Both were absolutely livid as they demanded to know what Zach was thinking when he nearly hit their boy. But Zach was in no mood to talk. He told the couple that they had better back up because they were not going to like what's coming out, referring to something he had inside his house. When Mr. Durham got a little too close to Zach, he threw a punch. It missed, but it was enough to have the Durhams' 2 teenage sons stepping in to try to defend their father. It was then that Zach grabbed a stun gun and knife from under the driver's seat of his truck, firing the taser at the 2 boys after swinging at them with the knife. Mr. Durham then grabbed Zach in a misguided attempt to disarm him, who was lithe and fast enough to shake the older man off before slashing his right arm with the knife. With Mr. Durham bleeding profusely from the knife wound, Zach attempted to retreat into his garage, but the red mist had descended on his older neighbor, with Mr. Durham following him into the garage, cursing up a storm and promising to kill him. A courtroom later heard that a brief but violent melee then ensued, one in which Durham was repeatedly shocked with a taser. Zach's young wife begged him to drop the knife, but despite her pleading, Zach plunged the tip of the knife into an area just below Mr. Durham's armpit, a stab wound which punctured his lung and caused it to fill with blood. The 51-year-old correctional officer died that night, with Zach being arrested at his grandparents' home just hours later. During his trial for murder, the prosecution was particularly interested in why Zach's wife had been so quick to pull out her phone to record the confrontation. And throughout hours of questioning and evidence examination, it was determined that Zach and his wife had frequently discussed the idea of recording another viral confrontation with the Durhams, one that would grow their already sizable TikTok following, and the one that could make them some money. In a phrase, the court established that Zach had manufactured the confrontation so he could become TikTok famous. If Latham was in fear for his or Sarah's safety, they both would have retreated inside, called police, and stayed there, the prosecuting attorney stated. They did not because their intent was to lure the Durhams there, attack them, and record it for TikTok. But Zachary's defense attorney painted a very different picture of the night's events, insisting that it was in fact his client that was the victim in the situation, given that the Durhams had ventured onto his property to instigate violence. A recording of his 911 call was played to the court, and this is what they heard. "Yeah, I need the cops out here. There's blood all over the place. I just got assaulted and jumped. I got beat up really bad and I have blood all over me. They came with trucks, came on my property with guns, and then when I fought them off, they drove away." It was a strong argument, but one that paled in comparison to the prosecution's own, which was ironically fueled by Zach's own actions. Since his arrest, Zach wasted no opportunity to grow his TikTok following by talking about the incident and broadcast to his thousands of followers. In the videos, he professes his innocence and insists that the killing was nothing but self-defense, arguing that he was merely a young man defending the home of his grandparents from armed intruders. But there was a distinctly darker side to the videos too, as Zach seemed content to whip up a frenzy of malcontent to direct at the Durhams and their friends. Zach's followers have been alleged to have harassed the Durhams directly, even going so far as to post their address in one video's comment section. Zach posted so frequently that, in the end, a superior court judge approved an order prohibiting him from making public remarks about the case, essentially silencing him before any trial can begin. This is most definitely something that's going to be used against Zach in his upcoming murder trial. The prosecution could well argue that his obsession with social media popularity pushed him to create more and more drama with a family that simply couldn't take his behavior any longer. Zach has documented his harassment of the Durhams. He filmed himself pushing a regularly suburban family to their limits, and when they finally snapped, he had someone ready to film that too. It seems that Zach is a young man with a very troubling upbringing, which included a juvenile criminal history and a penchant for violence. Whether or not you believe that Zach was just defending himself, or that he manufactured the confrontation, he has most certainly used his notoriety to foster a larger TikTok following, and that is something that is going to reflect very badly on him during his trial. Some people will do anything to be famous, but whether or not Zach killed a father of two over something as fickle as fame is something only a jury can now decide.
I am currently at a college in Boston and have an apartment in the North End with my buddy. We're both 21-year-old males. My girlfriend came up to the weekend to visit, and we were doing our normal weekend thing and drinking and just hanging out. My roommate convinced us to watch Green Inferno because it just made its way to Netflix, and I've been meaning to watch it. Horribly messed up movie, but pretty good if you like a gruesome horror flick and don't mind bad acting 3/4 of the way through the movie. I kept hearing this banging noise coming from what sounded like inside our building. At first, I ignored it, thinking I was just hearing things, or it was the noise from the busy main street that our apartment building is on. But after a few times, I thought I heard a girl scream. I paused the movie and asked my roommate and girlfriend if they heard it, and they both did. We shrugged it off as random kids getting drunk. I had it twice or more, and it wasn't sitting right with me. So I paused it and said to my roommate, "Let's just take a walk down the stairs and check the holes." We left our place on the 4th floor and headed towards the stairs, where we saw a man who looked to be in his mid to late 20s sitting on the stairs outside an apartment. And he looked like he was a mess. We asked him if this was his place, and he kind of said yes, but not definitely, and sounded a bit drunk. We had no reason not to believe him, so we went back to our room. But right when we got back, I remember that the only people that lived in that unit were 2 or 3 girls, and my one roommate agreed. We decided to head back out there, and at this point, my girlfriend was freaked out. We approached him again and asked him if he was sure this was his place. He stood up and said yes, and proceeded to aggressively bang on the door multiple times. When he stood up, I immediately noticed the poop stains on his white jeans and pointed it out to my roommate. We are both in-shape guys and realized right away, if anything needed to happen, we could easily take this guy on. At this point, we both said that we think we should leave because it clearly wasn't his abode. I mean, the dude crapped himself. He looked at us back to the door where he tried 5 different keys on the lock. Obviously, none of them worked. So we again firmly told him to leave the building. The whole time, he really didn't argue with us and never gave us a firm answer, further proving our point that he was messed up and didn't belong here. At this point, something must have clicked in his head. He started heading down the stairs with us closely in turn, making sure we left while plugging our noses and gagging on the stench of his crapped hands. When we were inside of the landing at the base of the stairs, the sight we saw made our stomachs drop. We saw a phone with a bunch on the top shelf that sits there, a hoodie strolling across the floor with a mask a few feet away, a satchel looking like bag even further away, and a package that I had seen in the lobby earlier. As soon as I saw this, I thought the absolute worst, and it looked like a struggle had taken place. I then asked him in an aggressive tone what he did, and I could tell he was scared now. He refused to answer me and tried to bang and open the apartment on the 1st floor, claiming that it was his place. He then went to collect his things from the floor, and just to make sure, I made him unlock the phone in front of us to prove it. It was Touch ID, and he opened it. We did not like the way he was acting, so he kept insisting he should leave as he formed answers back that were barely English. After that, he proceeded to walk towards the back of the building in a rather brisk pace. There was a tighter staircase at the back, which led to all floors as well as an alley at the back of the building. This is probably the strangest part, as very few people knew about this exit to our building, but he headed there with speed and confidence. My remote followed close behind to make sure he left and shut the back door firmly, as once it's shut, it can't be opened from the outside. I was far back gagging on the stench. After this, we went out the front door together and walked around to the back door to make sure the man was gone. We slipped a note under the door of the girls saying we saw a man and made him leave and to come knock or text us if they need anything, as we wanted to make sure they were okay. Luckily, this man left without any problem occurring between him and my roommates, and as I imagine, that definitely could have ended in an ugly manner. When you girls live there, and this man was giving off terrible creepy vibes, we aren't oblivious. I knew there was a strong chance he had ill intents with these girls, so we needed to act to that creepy man who was terrorizing the girls. Please, let's not ever meet. And you might want to pick up some adult diapers. So it turns out the girl who lives in the apartment was luckily not home when this all went down. She ended up texting us, so we explained what happened, and she was very freaked out. She called the landlord who got us to get our story, and she believes it could have been an old tenant who was subletting over the summer that constantly got locked down. He would come back drunk, bang on his door, and one time it actually broke down. It's hard to me to think it was the same guy, as he didn't start banging on the door until after we mentioned we knew a girl lived there. Also, this apartment is a floor above, and in a different spot than the one that the old tenant was in.